Hello everyone, I'm Ranger Haley and I'm here at the backyard of the Lincoln home. Throughout the day we have heard from our partners and special guests about what archaeology is, why we do it, and we have discussed some of the findings from archaeological work done here in the neighborhood, including in the backyard of the Lincoln home. For our last video topic today, we'll be taking a look at where some of these artifacts are housed and take a tour behind the scenes with our curator, Susan Hake. Hi Susan!
Well, hey Ranger Haley, welcome to Collection Storage. This is where we keep some of the artifacts in the collection. There are several other storage locations, a couple here in the park, as well as the main archaeological collection storage area for the Midwest Park Service region, which is out in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Hey Susan, after an artifact has been excavated, what happens to them?
All right, well, the archaeologists will have their squares marked off, so they have a certain grid system so they know exactly where things were found, and they will put things in brown paper bags, just like a regular lunch bag like this, and they'll make notes on like where it was found, when it was found. This, if you can read it, says below brick foundation wall on this one. And then they put all the artifacts and dirt and everything else that they found in that particular spot into those garbage bags or those lunch bags, and then they process them usually back at their own labs, or in our case, sometimes things get sent to Lincoln, Nebraska in these bags.
From these artifacts that have been excavated, what can we learn from them?
You can actually learn quite a bit. I know Terry talked about how even little pieces can tell you a lot about how a family was living at the time, or what they were using for dishes, what they were eating. Sometimes it tells you more about where the artifacts are found. If they're all found in one place, that might have been a privy or a trash dump site, versus a lot of construction materials like nails and plaster and things will sometimes almost form a line, like a trough around a building. That's called the construction trench. So it just depends on sometimes where you find things, and then also what you find. For example, we've got a piece of bone, and if you look at the note on it, it says it was found 130 to 145 centimeters below sill. So that sill was the sill of the Lincoln homes. That's about ground level. So 130 to 145 centimeters below that. So we're talking a yard, a little bit more than a yard down in the dirt. This bone was found. Now this bone, if you want to take a look at it, it's a rib bone from a cow. So most likely, and it's been butchered, so that meant that the Lincolns were eating beef ribs one night. I'm sure that was really good, lots of barbecue sauce. But then if you look at it very closely, like most families, what do you do with your bones if you have a dog? Well, you give the bones to the dog. So if you look, there's a scratch mark right here that was caused most likely by a dog. So this is probably, not only does this tell us what the Lincolns were eating, but it also tells us a little bit about how they treated their animals. They gave them rib bones to chew on. Obviously they cared a lot for their dog, but it just helps kind of reinforce everyday life, what they would have done just on an average day.
Here in our collection space, what steps do you guys take to maintain these artifacts?
In this particular building, we have a lot of different kinds of artifacts. We have ceramics over here. We have archaeological artifacts behind me, and those are everything from the bones to ceramics to metal nails to window glass, some leather. So we have to kind of maintain an average climate for everything. Ideally, the climate in here should be between 60 and 70 degrees and between 30 and 50% humidity to cover all the different types of materials. If we had just one type of material, the ranges would be a lot tighter. Another thing we do, we keep this room completely dark when we're not in it. That helps to prevent fading and other light damage. We've also got, you notice these are earthquake proofing. So this helps keep the boxes from shaking off of the shelving. We've got the major shelving units secured to the ceiling. So we try to keep things as safe as possible and as stable an environment as possible.
Susan, you have just showed us examples of artifacts that were excavated in the Lincoln home neighborhood. What other types of artifacts do we have in our collection that gives us an insight to the day-to-day life of the Lincoln family?
We have a lot of different things. We have furniture and different, they're called decorative arts, so prints and drawings and napkins and dishes and everything that you would kind of need in a house, what a typical house would have. We have a lot of those artifacts. We do have some specific Lincoln artifacts. Not all of them are on exhibit in the Lincoln home or in the visitor center. Some of them are too fragile to be out on exhibit for long periods of time. One of the pieces we do have is Abraham Lincoln's lap desk, and we keep it in an acid-free box. Keep it nice and padded, and a little bit of tissue to try and absorb some extra moisture if there is any. So this is Abraham Lincoln's lap desk. This is something that he would throw in his saddlebags if he was going to be out on the circuit. It's a writing desk, but it was also kind of the early form of a laptop computer, if you want to go with that. About the same concept. This is a pretty typical lap desk of the time period. It's a nice wooden desk. There would have been a little brass plate if he'd wanted to put his initials engraved on it or whatever. He did not. It did lock. Unfortunately, we don't have the key. But it opens up. And you've got a nice writing surface. This happens to be covered with a purple silk. May or may not be the original fabric, we're not sure, but the silk was available in the early 1850s, or in 1840s. It has been repaired, though, you can see. But it's kind of a nifty little thing here. You've got a space to keep, if it'll open. Nope, that one's not going to. But you could keep papers, envelopes, things like that underneath. Of course, you've got a space here for your quill pens. Would have gone there. Could have been wax seals, different little pen nibs if you were using a steel pen nib. And then, of course, the inkwell. And it still has ink in it, you can see. And then, of course, when you were done with whatever you were writing, you just fold it up. And back it goes into a desk, a drawer, or in Lincoln's case, his saddlebag. We have the Lincoln's Cradle. Oh. That is, it was something that we know the three younger boys would have used. It's a pretty good sized cradle, which means it probably wasn't used when Robert was born because they were in a very small room, about 8 feet by 14 feet, so that's the size of a pretty typical bedroom. Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily room enough for an almost 5 foot long cradle. So this was probably something they bought when they had Eddie, their second child. It was given, Mr. Lincoln gave it back to the shop where they had bought it here in Springfield with the note, the next clerk, which would have been one of the young men working in the store, the next clerk who had a baby would get the cradle. And so that family was here in Springfield still, and they gave it back to the Lincoln home a couple of years, obviously about 100 years later. So this is the cradle, and you can see we've got it behind a dust cover as well. And again, the earthquake proofing, we've got it stabilized so it doesn't rock too much. And then we've got a tag on it that helps us with inventory. Make sure we know where it is all the time.
Can you tell us what a curator does and how that job ties into archaeology and interpretation here at the home?
Curator is basically the keeper of stuff, for lack of a better description. We keep track of anything that has been given to the park or been found in the park, like the archaeology. We also do research on different artifacts so we can learn more about them and then pass that information along to the interpreters. For example, some of the archaeology may have a mark on it. We may not know exactly when the Lincolns would have used it, other than kind of a basic range of dates, but the mark might tell us exactly when that particular item was made. So then we can say, well, okay, this was made in 1858. The Lincolns were then using it kind of the last couple of years they lived here. For example, I can show you a piece that has a maker's mark on it if you'd like to see it. There we go. I knew I had it. So for example, after the bags of stuff have been shipped off to either the lab or the archaeologist, they clean them up and then rehouse them in nice clean bags and things like that, with usually some sort of tag that tells us a little bit more about it. So this, for example, this is a saucer. You can kind of see. And it was found in 1951 by the state archaeologist. The Lincoln home was under the direction of the state of Illinois at the time. But this mark on the back can tell us, well, it'll tell us maybe who made it. We're missing part of the name, but we can get Tompkinson Brothers, which was a famous ceramic or dishware firm in England. And then this is a specific mark that was used by different companies that had access, or that had been approved by the king or the queen at the time. They still use this actually in England. This is where we find out, for example, that the Lincolns used that kind of plain white dishware in the house, so then we can use that to buy reproductions of them, and then that's what shows up in the house. We have some other dishes that are a lot more decorative, that would show us maybe the little bit nicer set of china that Mary would have used. So it's all part of the creating the overall context of what the Lincolns were doing while they were here.
What words of advice do you have for someone who wants to pursue a career in museum curatorship?
Well, it helps if you have an interest in history or archaeology or art. Really, you could have an interest in almost anything, and there's going to be a museum for it. But it's really neat. It's fun. You get to kind of really experience artifacts firsthand. First time I held a book that was signed by Mary Lincoln, you get kind of a chill down your spine, just to try and get that up close and personal chance to see things. So we try to take our experiences and share them with everybody else as well.
Hey Susan, we saw a presentation earlier about some excavations that had been done in the Jenkins lot here in our neighborhood. Can you show us some of those findings?
Well, we were lucky when the archaeologists did the different areas of the lot. They did find things that are more modern. Not just things from the Jenkins and Blanks era, but more recently. So it tells us about the whole history of that lot. There were a couple other buildings, a couple other houses before they were all torn down, and it was an empty lot with the way the Park Service has it. So we have like a piece of a pot that was possibly from the Jenkins or the Blanks family, but this style pot has been around for hundreds of years, so we don't know exactly when it was in use. We've got things like clinkers. I think Terry mentioned a clinker. If you don't know what a clinker is, it is the leftover coal that has been burning in a furnace. So that's obviously not something that the Blanks or the Jenkins family had. This was one of the more modern pieces. So this is a clinker. And we even have a modern ring that is probably from maybe the 1980s. Let's see if I can get it open without sending it flying. So if you can see that, it's cubic zirconia ring. Again, something that clearly would not have been used by the Blanks or the Jenkins, but was probably lost by a visitor or somebody who was living in the house at the time. So it continues. Archaeology doesn't stop at 1860 just because that's our main area of focus. We collect for all different eras.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all for joining us today for our virtual Archaeology Day 2020 here at Lincoln Home National Historic Site. We would also like to thank our partners, the Illinois State Museum, the Edwards Place, as well as our special guests, Floyd Mansberger and Terrence Martin, for helping us understand the home life through archaeology. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you next year.